The palace corridors were quiet after the court was dismissed, but inside the human guard the noise of the past was loud and alive. He walked behind the royal escort without speaking, his face calm, yet his mind far away from the shining walls of the alien capital. Years ago, he had lived under a different sky, one filled with soft blue light and two small moons. His colony was small, but full of hope. Humans had built it with their own hands on the edge of known space. They believed the Empire would never look at a weak and distant world like theirs. They were wrong. The first alien ships arrived without warning, black shapes that blocked the stars. At first, the colony leaders tried to send peaceful signals. They believed in talks and trade, but the Empire did not come for trade. It came for control. Massive beams of light fell from the sky and cut buildings in half. The ground shook as if the planet itself was afraid. He was only a young man then, but he remembered every sound. The screams, the alarms, the sky turning red. He remembered running through smoke to find his family. He remembered holding his younger sister's hand as they tried to reach the underground shelters. And he remembered the moment an explosion threw him across the street and silence filled his ears. When he woke up, the city was no longer a city. It was fire and ash. The shelters had collapsed. The streets were empty except for shadows and broken metal. He searched for hours, maybe days, he never found them. The Empire called it a necessary action. They said the colony had refused to accept imperial rule. They said resistance must be erased before it spreads. For the Empire, it was strategy. For him, it was the end of everything. Something inside him broke that day. But something else was born, a quiet promise that he would never forgive and never forget. He survived by hiding among the ruins until scavenger ships came to collect resources from what was left. He saw how the Empire treated defeated worlds. They took minerals, technology, even people. Humans were considered useful but emotional and unstable. They were given low ranks and watched closely. That was when he made his choice. He did not join the rebels who fought in open space. He chose a different path. He would go to the center of the Empire. He would stand inside its heart. He would learn its weakness. Joining the palace guard was not easy for a human. Many rejected him. Many insulted him, but he trained harder than anyone else. He endured every test, every humiliation, every silent look of hatred. His anger became fuel, not wild and loud, but controlled and sharp, like a blade hidden under cloth. Over the years, he earned a reputation. Not because he spoke, but because he survived. He completed missions others failed. He protected nobles who barely thanked him. He fought creatures imported from dangerous worlds and did not fall. Yet no one knew the real reason. He pushed himself so hard every night when the palace grew quiet. He would remember the burning sky of his colony. He would remember the sound of his sister calling his name, and the promise inside him would grow stronger. He did not hate every alien. He hated the Empire, the system that decided which worlds lived and which burned. Now, as he walked deeper into the palace after standing before the Queen, memories mixed with the present. He had expected to die in that throne room. Part of him even welcomed it, but the Queen's reaction confused him. She did not look like the generals who gave destruction orders from safe towers. Her eyes had held something else when she looked at him, something almost like understanding, that made him uneasy, because anger was simple. Anger gave direction, but doubt was dangerous. The escort stopped in front of a tall silver door that led to a private royal wing. The guard stepped aside and allowed him to pass alone. As the door closed behind him, the silence felt heavy again. He wondered if this was the moment she would question him about his past, if she already knew about the colony, about the family he lost, about the reason he refused to kneel. Part of him feared she might speak their names, because that would mean the Empire had records of everything it destroyed, and that thought made his hands tighten to fists. Far above the palace towers, the same Empire ships that once burned his world still protected the capital. Still proud, still powerful, but for the first time since the day his colony fell, something felt different. He was no longer a powerless survivor, hiding in ruins. He was inside the palace, close to the throne, and the Queen herself had taken interest in him. He did not know whether this would lead to revenge, truth, or something he never expected. But one thing was clear, his hatred had brought him to this moment. And the empire that once erased his world had no idea that the angry human they allowed into their palace was carrying a past that could, one day, shake the very foundation of their rule. The silver doors sealed behind him with a deep sound that echoed through the quiet chamber. And for the first time since entering the palace, he was completely alone with the queen of the empire that destroyed his world. The room was not like the throne hall. It was smaller, darker, and far more personal. Soft blue light moved along the curved walls. And in the center stood a circular platform surrounded by floating holographic stars that slowly turned like a living map of the galaxy. The queen stood near the platform with her back to him. Her long silver robe touching the floor like flowing water. She did not look like a ruler at that moment. She looked like someone deep in thought. He remained near the door, waiting for guards to appear or hidden weapons to activate. But nothing happened. There were no soldiers, no advisors, no weapons pointed at his head, only silence. She finally spoke without turning around, her voice calm and steady. She asked him if he truly believed the Empire enjoyed destroying human worlds. The question surprised him because he expected threats, not questions. He answered carefully, saying that it did not matter what the Empire enjoyed, only what it had done. She turned slowly then, her glowing eyes watching him closely. She said his file was thick, full of reports of bravery and discipline, but also full of notes about anger, about disobedience, about refusal to fully submit. She stepped closer and asked him what he really wanted, revenge or justice. He did not answer right away because he was not sure anymore. Revenge had guided him for years, but standing this close to the most powerful being in the galaxy made him realize revenge was not simple. She walked toward the floating galaxy map and waved her hand. Several human colonies appeared in light, some bright and active, others dark and marked as lost. His heart tightened when he saw the name of his home world glowing in red. She told him that not all destruction orders came from her throne. The empire was vast, filled with generals who acted in fear, who believed that strong action was the only way to control rising species like humans. She admitted that fear ruled many parts of the empire, and fear led to cruelty. He felt anger rise again, but this time it was mixed with confusion. She continued and said that humans were different from other species. They adapted too fast. They survived impossible conditions. They formed bonds stronger than logic, and that made them unpredictable. The empire feared unpredictability more than strength. She stepped even closer until they stood face to face, and she said something that made his breath slow. She said she had watched him since the day he entered the palace guard. She had seen how he protected alien civilians during a riot instead of letting them suffer. She had seen how he risked his life for soldiers who insulted him. She said his anger was controlled, focused, not wild like the rebels outside the empire. Walls. Then her tone changed slightly, softer but serious. She revealed that rebellion was growing inside the empire itself. Powerful generals were planning to remove her because they believed she was too patient with new species like humans. She needed someone who understood both pain and discipline, someone who could stand in the center of chaos without losing control. She told him she chose him not because he was human, but because he was angry and still loyal to his own code. He felt the weight of her words pressing on him. This was not a trap for execution. This was something far more dangerous. She was offering him a role in a political storm he never planned to enter. He asked her why she trusted him when he clearly hated the empire. She answered that hatred was honest, and honest emotion was easier to work with than fake loyalty. She said many of her generals smiled while planning betrayal, but he stood openly defiant, and that was easier to respect. The holographic stars shifted suddenly as an alert signal flashed across the map. Red lights pulsed near the outer sectors of the capital system. She looked at the warning without panic and explained that certain military leaders believed the time was right to take control. She looked back at him and asked if he would protect a system that once hurt him, if it meant preventing even greater destruction across the galaxy. The question struck deeper than any weapon. He had dreamed of bringing the empire down, but he had never considered what would rise from its ashes: chaos, civil war, more burning worlds. She stepped back slightly and told him he did not have to answer immediately. But events were already moving, and soon he would have to choose between being a weapon of anger or a shield for something better. The chamber felt smaller now, heavy with unspoken tension. Outside those walls, powerful forces were preparing for conflict. Inside the room, a single decision could change the direction of empires. He realized that this private meeting was not about punishment or forgiveness. It was about trust placed in the most unlikely place, an angry human standing in the heart of alien power. And as another warning light flashed across the holographic stars, he understood that whatever choice he made next would not only define his future, it would shape the fate of worlds that did not even know his name. The throne room of the alien empire was silent, but it was not peaceful. Tall, glowing pillars reached high into the dark ceiling. Blue light moved like slow water across the walls, and hundreds of alien nobles stood in perfect lines, waiting for their queen to arrive. At the center of the hall stood a single human guard. His armor was simple, dark, and slightly damaged. His hands were behind his back, his jaw tight, his eyes cold. He did not look afraid. He looked angry. The other guards kept their distance from him. They whispered when they thought he could not hear. Humans are known to be strong, but this one was different. He had once stopped a royal beast with his bare hands. He had once fought 3 trained soldiers and did not fall. No one understood why he joined the palace guard of the very empire that defeated his people years ago. Some said he wanted power. Some said he wanted death, but no one dared to ask him. A deep sound echoed across the hall. The doors slowly opened, and the alien queen entered. Her presence filled the room like gravity. Her long silver robes moved without wind. Her crown shined with living light. Every alien dropped to their knees at once, their heads low to the ground. But the human did not move. He remained standing, his eyes fixed forward, his heart steady. A soft wave of shock moved through the crowd. A general near the front slowly turned his head toward the human, his eyes wide with anger. How dare a low, human refuse to bow? Guards tightened their grip on their weapons. Energy blades hummed softly, waiting for command. The queen walked down from her throne step by step, her expression calm, unreadable. She stopped halfway down the stairs. She looked across the kneeling court. Then her eyes landed on the human. For a long moment she said nothing. The room felt smaller, heavier. One wrong move could mean death. The general stepped forward and spoke loudly. He said the human had dishonored the empire and must be punished. His voice echoed against the shining walls. But the queen slowly raised one hand, and the general fell silent at once. She continued walking until she stood only a few steps away from the human guard. She was taller than him, her glowing eyes searching his face. He did not lower his gaze. He did not speak. He did not bow. The queen tilted her head slightly, as if studying a rare creature, and for the first time, something unexpected appeared in her eyes. It was not anger. It was curiosity. She asked him in a quiet voice why he refused to kneel. The entire court held its breath. The human finally spoke. His voice was calm but filled with fire. He said he would serve with honor. He would protect with strength, but he would never kneel again to anyone who destroyed his world. The words hit the hall like a shockwave. Several nobles gasped. One guard even stepped forward ready to strike him down, but again the queen raised her hand, and no one moved. She stepped even closer until only a small space remained between them. She could feel the heat of his anger, and he could see the strange light inside her eyes. Instead of ordering his execution, she did something no one expected. She smiled slightly. It was small but real. She told him to look at her, and he did without fear. In that moment, something shifted inside the palace. Something ancient and silent seemed to wake. The lights along the pillars flickered for a second. The air felt charged. The queen asked him his name. He answered without hesitation. She repeated it softly, as if testing its weight. The nobles looked confused. The generals looked furious. But the queen seemed more interested than ever. She told the court that the human would remain standing. She declared that his anger was not weakness. It was strength, and strength should not be wasted. Whispers spread quickly across the hall. Why was she protecting him? Why was she not punishing him? The human did not understand either, but he did not show it. On his face, deep inside, he had prepared for death the moment he refused to bow. Yet here he was, still alive, standing in front of the most powerful being in the galaxy. The queen leaned closer and spoke so only he could hear. She said the Empire had many loyal soldiers, but none with fire in their eyes. She said she had been watching him for a long time. The human felt a small chill run down his spine. He realized this moment was not random. This was planned. The queen then turned to the court and ordered everyone to rise, her voice strong and clear. She announced that the human guard would continue his duty at her side, and anyone who questioned her decision would answer to her directly. Silence followed her words, heavy and tense. The human stood there still angry, still confused, but now something else mixed with his anger, curiosity. The queen looked back at him one more time and said softly that the palace was not ready for what was coming. No one understood what she meant, but they all felt it. Something had begun, something dangerous, something that could change the Empire forever. And as the great doors of the throne room slowly closed behind them, the future of the galaxy quietly shifted in that single moment. If you want to see what happens next and how this angry human changes everything, make sure to subscribe to this channel and stay with the story, because this was only the beginning. The next cycle, the throne room was more crowded than ever. Word had spread that the queen would make an important announcement. Nobles from distant systems stood beneath the glowing pillars. Armored commanders lined the walls, and the air felt tight with quiet tension. The human guard stood at the right side of the throne, closer than he had ever stood before, his armor polished but still marked with old scars, his face calm, yet alert. He could feel eyes on him from every corner of the hall, some curious, some hateful, some afraid. The queen entered with slow and steady steps, her presence commanding silence at once. She sat upon the high throne and looked across the court, her gaze sharp and unreadable. She began to speak about unity, about strength through balance, about the need to guide rising species instead of crushing them. Her words were smooth but heavy. Many nobles shifted uncomfortably, and among them stood High General Varix, the most powerful military leader in the inner systems, his armor dark red, his eyes cold and burning with pride. He had fought in dozens of conquests, including the campaign against the human colonies, and he believed fear was the only true law of the galaxy. When the queen announced that the human guard would be given the title of Royal Protector and serve directly at her side, the silence shattered. Whispers turned into open protests. Several commanders stepped forward in anger, but Varix did not shout. He only smiled slightly, a smile that did not reach his eyes. He bowed slowly and asked permission to speak, his voice calm, but carrying across the vast chamber. He questioned whether placing trust in a human who openly admitted hatred for the Empire was wise. He said emotions made humans unstable, dangerous, unpredictable. The queen answered firmly that controlled emotion was strength, not weakness, and that loyalty built from understanding was stronger than loyalty built from fear. The tension rose like a storm about to break. Then, without warning, Varix moved, faster than most eyes could follow. An energy blade ignited from his arm, glowing bright and deadly, and he lunged straight toward the throne. Chaos exploded across the hall. Nobles screamed. Guards rushed forward, but the human guard reacted first, his body moving before thought. He stepped between Varix and the queen, catching the general's blade with his armored forearm guard. Sparks flew as metal and energy clashed. The force pushed him back, but he did not fall. Varix's eyes widened for a brief second, surprised by the speed of a human. They fought in close range, blade against reinforced armor, strike after strike echoing like thunder. Alien soldiers hesitated, unsure whether to attack their own high general or defend him. The queen remained seated, but her eyes followed every movement carefully. The human guard saw something in Varix's attacks that confirmed the truth. This was not sudden anger. This was planned. Several other officers began drawing weapons, revealing their loyalty to the general. The betrayal was larger than one blade. The human twisted his body, deflected another strike, and drove his shoulder into Varix's chest, sending the armored general crashing into the lower steps of the throne. But the attack was not over. Two elite warriors rushed from the side with twin energy spears, aiming directly at the queen. The human moved again, faster than they expected. He grabbed one spear mid-strike and used its momentum to throw its owner across the floor. then ducked under the second spear and struck the attacker with a powerful blow to the helmet, cracking it open. The hall had turned into a battlefield. Loyal guards finally joined the fight. Clashing with the traitors in flashes of light and steel, Varix rose again. Fury now clear on his face, he shouted that the Empire had grown weak under a ruler who listened to humans. He declared that strength required dominance, not patience. He charged. Once more, this time aiming not at the queen but at the human. Their blades met again, and this time the human did not only defend, he attacked with controlled aggression, each movement precise, each strike fueled by years of silent anger. He remembered the burning sky of his colony. He remembered the promise he made in the ruins, but he also remembered the queen's words about chaos and what would follow if the empire shattered. He realized in that moment he was not fighting for revenge. He was fighting to prevent another world from burning. With one final powerful move, he disarmed Varix, sending the energy blade sliding across the floor. Then he struck the general hard enough to drop him to his knees. Palace guards surrounded the fallen traitor, weapons pointed at his throat. Silence slowly returned to the hall, broken only by the sound of heavy breathing and distant alarms shutting down. The nobles stared in disbelief. The human they called unstable had just saved the throne. The queen stood from her seat and stepped down toward the defeated general. She declared Varix guilty of treason and ordered his arrest. Then she turned to the human guard. Her voice clear and strong, she announced before the entire court that from this day forward he was officially royal protector of the empire. Protector not because of birth, not because of bloodline, but because of proven loyalty in the face of betrayal. Some nobles lowered their heads in respect. Others did so in anger, but none dared to speak against her now. The human stood there, chest rising slowly, aware that everything had changed. He had protected the ruler of the empire he once swore to destroy, and in doing so he had placed himself at the center of a political storm far greater than a single battle. As the traitors were dragged away and the court slowly regained order, one truth became clear to everyone present. The angry human was no longer just a guard. He had become a symbol, and symbols were far more dangerous than soldiers. The arrest of General Varix did not bring peace to the palace. It only made the silence heavier. Whispers moved through every corridor, and loyal officers quietly searched for more hidden traitors. But that same night, the queen summoned the human royal protector to a place very few had ever seen, a sealed chamber far below the main throne room, hidden beneath layers of ancient stone and living metal. The doors opened with a deep mechanical sound, revealing a vast circular hall filled with floating holograms and symbols older than the current empire itself. The air felt different there, colder, older, as if history itself was watching. The human stepped forward slowly, his eyes scanning the glowing displays of star systems and unfamiliar markings. In the center of the chamber stood a tall crystal pillar projecting a rotating double helix made of light. It was human DNA, enlarged and spinning slowly in the dark. He froze when he recognized the pattern. The queen stood beside the projection and spoke in a lower tone than usual. She told him that humans were not just another young species rising by chance. Thousands of cycles ago, before the current empire was formed, there existed an ancient warrior civilization known only in fragments of lost records. They were not conquerors like the empire, but protectors who traveled between stars defending weaker worlds from extinction-level threats. They were strong, adaptable, and emotionally bonded in ways other species could not fully understand. But they disappeared suddenly after a great galactic crisis, leaving behind ruins and scattered genetic traces. For years, scholars believed the warrior race had been completely erased, until human explorers began spreading across space with impossible speed, surviving hostile planets, forming alliances, and resisting domination even when outmatched. The queen moved her hand, and the hologram shifted, overlaying the ancient warrior DNA pattern with human DNA. The two structures aligned almost perfectly. The difference was small but undeniable. Humans were descendants of that lost protector race, but something in their genetic memory had been locked or weakened over time, perhaps by evolution, perhaps by survival, perhaps by design. The Empire had known this secret for decades, and that was the true reason human colonies were monitored so closely, not because they were weak, but because they carried the potential to awaken something powerful. The human felt his heartbeat grow louder in his ears. Anger mixed with disbelief, he asked why the Empire never told humanity the truth. The Queen answered that fear ruled the old council. They believed if humans discovered their heritage too early, they might unite and challenge imperial authority. So instead of guiding them, the generals chose suppression, control, and in some cases destruction. She did not defend those choices. She only admitted them. The hologram shifted again, showing recordings of ancient battlefields where glowing armored warriors stood against massive cosmic creatures, protecting entire star systems from annihilation. Their movements were fast, their coordination perfect, their emotional bonds visible in shared neural patterns. She explained that emotional intensity was not a weakness in humans. It was the key to activating deeper genetic responses. When humans experienced extreme stress combined with purpose, their bodies released rare biochemical signals not found in other species, signals that could trigger dormant abilities, enhance strength, rapid healing, advanced pattern recognition, even limited energy manipulation under specific conditions. The human remembered the throne room battle, the speed of his movements, the clarity of his thoughts, the way his body felt stronger than ever before, and he realized something had already begun to change. The Queen confirmed it. During the fight, with Varric's palace scanners recorded unusual energy spikes around his neural field, small but measurable, proof that his ancient lineage was stirring. She stepped closer and told him that if civil war erupted inside the Empire, enemies beyond their borders would take advantage. Old cosmic threats that once nearly erased the ancient warrior race were still out there in the dark, watching, waiting, and if humans truly carried that forgotten power, then awakening, it could mean the difference between survival and extinction, not just for the Empire, but for the entire galaxy. The chamber lights dimmed slightly as distant alarms echoed faintly from above, evidence that unrest was still spreading. She looked directly into his eyes and said that the truth about humans was both a gift and a burden. They were born from protectors, but protection required choice, not hatred. She warned him that awakening too quickly without discipline could damage his body or mind. The ancient race vanished partly because their power consumed them during the final crisis. Uncontrolled emotion burned too bright. He stood there staring at the glowing image of his own genetic code, realizing that his anger was more than personal pain. It was a spark connected to something ancient and vast, something that once guarded entire civilizations. The weight of that knowledge pressed heavily on him. He had entered the palace seeking revenge, but now he carried a truth that could rewrite the future of humanity itself. And as the holographic galaxy rotated slowly around them, he understood that his fight was no longer about one burned colony. It was about whether the legacy of protectors would rise again or remain buried in fear and somewhere beyond the capital system. Unseen forces were already moving, sensing that something long dormant had begun to awaken. The attack began before dawn cycle, when the palace lights were dim and most nobles believed the danger had passed. A deep explosion shook the lower towers, followed by the sharp sound of alarms echoing through every corridor. Red warning lights flashed across the walls as defense shields flickered and failed in sections of the outer ring. The rebellion had moved faster than expected. Hidden loyalists of General Varric's had opened internal gates, allowing armed fleets to land directly within the capital district. Inside the palace, chaos spread quickly. Guards rushed to positions. Servants ran for cover, and distant blasts sent dust falling from the high ceilings. The human royal protector was already moving before the first full report reached the throne room. He felt it in his chest like a storm breaking. This was not a small riot. This was a full attempt to seize power. He entered the main hall to find the Queen standing calm, but surrounded by defensive guards, holographic displays, showing enemy units advancing through multiple palace sectors. Traitor officers were leading coordinated strikes toward the central command tower. Their goal was clear: capture or kill the Queen before loyal forces could regroup. The human stepped forward and requested permission to lead the internal defense teams. The queen studied him for only a second before nodding, her voice steady as she ordered all loyal units to follow his command. Some alien officers hesitated at first, but the memory of him defeating Varix silenced their doubt. The human moved through the corridors like controlled lightning, giving clear and simple orders, sealing breach points, redirecting troops, prioritizing civilian evacuation over revenge strikes. He did not allow anger to control him. He allowed purpose to guide him. Rebels wearing dark armor poured into the eastern wing, firing energy rounds that burned into palace walls. The human met them head-on with a small unit of mixed-species guards. The fight was brutal and close, sparks and smoke filling the narrow halls. He blocked blasts with reinforced shields, struck down attackers with fast and precise movements, and protected wounded soldiers regardless of their race. At one point, a collapsing ceiling trapped a group of young alien cadets beneath metal beams. Without hesitation, he lifted the heavy structure with a roar of effort that felt almost unnatural, veins glowing faintly under his skin as a surge of power moved through him. The cadets escaped in shock, staring at the human who had just saved them. Rumors of his strength spread rapidly through loyal channels, boosting morale at a critical moment. Meanwhile, traitor commanders advanced toward the throne chamber from multiple directions. Their strategy was ruthless: sacrifice outer forces to create distraction, while elite assassins targeted the queen directly. The human anticipated this move and positioned himself in the final corridor leading to the throne, the air thick with smoke and flickering light. Footsteps echoed as a squad of elite rebel warriors approached, their leader removing his helmet to reveal a scarred alien officer who once served beside Varix. He declared that the Empire would return to pure strength once the Queen fell, and that the human was nothing more than a temporary mistake. The battle that followed shook the corridor walls. Blades of energy clashed in rapid bursts. The human felt his body reacting faster than thought, every strike clearer, every movement sharper, as if invisible lines connected his mind to the battlefield. He disarmed one attacker, redirected another's blast into a wall, and engaged the rebel leader in direct combat. Their duel fierce and relentless. But this time the human's power surged beyond anything he had felt before, a faint glow surrounding his form as adrenaline and ancient instinct merged. With one final calculated strike, he shattered the rebel's weapon and drove him to the ground, ending the assault at the entrance of the throne room. Inside the palace, the tide began to turn. Loyal forces pushed back invaders sector by sector. External fleets engaged rebel ships in orbit, and the capital skies filled with streaks of light from heavy weapons fire. Yet victory came at a cost. The human staggered slightly once the final enemy fell, pain spreading through his muscles from the unnatural strain. Small cracks forming along his armor where energy blasts had struck. He ignored the injury and walked back into the throne room, where the queen stood unharmed, but watching him with intense focus. The rebellion was collapsing, but it had revealed how fragile the empire truly was. Nobles who once whispered against him now looked at him with something close to respect, not because he was human, but because he had chosen to protect instead of destroy. As the last alarm signals faded and reports confirmed the arrest of remaining traitors, silence slowly returned to the palace once more, but it was not the same silence as before. This one carried the weight of change. The human realized that the war inside the palace was only the beginning. External enemies would soon test the Empire's weakness, and whatever ancient force was awakening inside him would not remain hidden for long. He had defended the throne, but now the galaxy itself was watching, waiting to see what the angry human would become next. When the final rebel signal went silent and the palace shield stabilized, a strange quiet settled over the capital. Not the fragile quiet of fear, but the heavy quiet that follows a storm when everyone is still counting what survived. The human royal protector remained standing in the center of the throne room for a moment longer, his armor cracked in several places. Faint lines of light fading beneath his skin as the surge of power slowly withdrew. Pain moved through his body in waves, but he refused to fall. Across the hall, alien guards, nobles, and servants stared at him differently now. No longer as an outsider, no longer as a tolerated human, but as the one who had stood between chaos and collapse. The queen stepped down from her throne without ceremony and walked directly to him, her movements calm yet filled with purpose. When she reached him, she did something no ruler of the empire had done in recorded history. She lowered herself to one knee beside a human soldier. The room filled with sharp breaths of shock, but she did not care about tradition in that moment. She placed one glowing hand over his injured arm and spoke clearly so all could hear. She declared that strength was not measured by conquest, but by protection, and that this human had shown the true meaning of power. She announced that the old policies of fear would end, that no rising species would be crushed for growing too fast, and that humanity would no longer stand as subjects under watch, but as equal allies in a new interstellar order. Murmurs spread quickly through the chamber, some confused, some hopeful, some resistant. Yet none dared challenge her after what they had witnessed. She ordered the release of restricted records concerning human origins, stating that truth would no longer be hidden behind fear. The human listened in silence, still struggling to process the shift taking place around him. Only days ago he had planned to bring the empire down from within, and now he was being named the bridge between two civilizations. He expected anger to rise at the thought, but instead he felt something unfamiliar, a sense of direction larger than revenge. The queen rose and helped him stand fully upright, making it clear to every witness that he was not beneath her authority, but beside it in responsibility. Outside the palace, news of the rebellion's failure spread across the capital systems, and images of the human defending the throne circulated through military and civilian networks. On distant human settlements, survivors watched in disbelief as the empire publicly recognized one of their own not as a threat, but as a protector. Fear slowly began to mix with cautious pride. Within days, a formal gathering of the Imperial Council was held. Representatives from multiple species attended. Tension high as the Queen presented a new charter of alliance that granted humanity autonomy within the Empire while inviting them into shared defense leadership. Some council members resisted, warning that empowering humans could unbalance galactic politics. But others reminded them that without the human royal protector, the throne would have fallen, and with it perhaps the entire system. During the ceremony, the human was asked to speak, something he had never expected. He stepped forward slowly, aware that billions across different worlds were listening. He did not speak of ancient warrior bloodlines or hidden power. He spoke of loss, of burned skies, and broken families. He admitted his hatred openly. And then he said that hatred alone builds nothing lasting. He said if humans truly carried the legacy of protectors, then their future must be chosen wisely, not forced by anger. His simple words carried more weight than polished speeches, because they were honest. By the end of the gathering, the alliance was approved by narrow but decisive agreement. The empire would change course, guided not by fear of potential, but by cooperation with it. Yet, even as celebration began in parts of the capital, the Queen and the humans stood together at a high balcony overlooking the city lights. Beyond the atmosphere, distant stars shimmered, and among them were regions still unexplored, still dangerous. The Queen quietly revealed that long-range sensors had detected unusual movements in deep space, patterns similar to the ancient threats that once destroyed the original protector race. The rebellion inside the palace might have been only a distraction, a test to see whether the empire remained divided and weak. The human looked toward the stars with steady eyes, understanding that peace inside the capital did not mean safety beyond it. The unexpected outcome of the palace war was not just political reform or personal honor. It was awakening of truth, awakening of unity, and perhaps awakening of an ancient responsibility. As ships prepared to launch joint human and alien patrol fleets for the first time in history, whispers spread across the galaxy about the angry human who refused to kneel. Some called him dangerous, others called him a symbol of change. But those who stood in the throne room that day understood something deeper. The galaxy had once feared human anger, yet it was human choice that reshaped an empire. And as new alliances formed and old enemies watched from the shadows of deep space, one reality became clear: this was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new era where humanity would no longer rise in isolation, but stand at the front lines of a united galaxy, ready for whatever darkness waited beyond the stars.